All right, so we're going to talk about Objective 1.5, angle relations in geometry. We're going to talk about some specific types of angles and what their names are and what that means for us. So the first thing is adjacent angles. Adjacent angles are two angles that lie on the same plane, share a common vertex and a common side, but no common interior points. We have an example down here below. We've got angle ABC, and that angle is adjacent to angle DBC. We can see that common side that those two angles share is BC, but we can see that all the points over here are not going to be shared with the points over here. Same thing down below, it's still angle CBD and then angle ABD. So those angles are side by side. The next angles that we're going to talk about are vertical angles. Vertical angles are super important in geometry. Vertical angles are always congruent. Vertical angles being congruent, we will come back to that over and over and over again in geometry. These angles are not adjacent. They are not side by side. I like to think of them as being across from each other. They almost make a reflection of each other, okay? So, in this picture, angle AED, okay? That angle is vertical to angle BEC. See, they make an X. Their intersection is where their corner or their vertex is. And on the other side of that, we could say that angle AEB, so that would be the angle kind of at the top, would be vertical to angle DEC. So I've tried to color code that so you can see how angles across from each other are vertical angles and they're always congruent. Now, my pen's not wanting to work this morning. This is not vertical. These two angles right here. Those two are not vertical, so that's not an example of what a vertical angle is. The last thing in geometry that we're going to talk about with names of angles is this linear pair. A linear pair is pretty important as well. These are adjacent angles, so these angles are going to be side by side. But that word linear, what does that word make you think of? Linear. Well, it's got that word line in it. So a linear pair is going to be two angles that make a straight line. So we can see that this angle over here and angle number 2, if we were to put those together, they would make a straight line. So that's a linear pair. So we got some examples. We want two obtuse vertical angles. So first of all, obtuse. Obtuse has to be something greater than 90 degrees. So if we look in our picture, this right here, this 115, that's just glaring out at me that, hey, that's an obtuse angle. So if we look, I'm going to use my highlighter. I think you can see it better with the highlighter. If we look at angle VZX, that's obtuse. And what is across from it? Well, that would be YZW. So angle VZX, and YZW. Those are two obtuse vertical angles. So now, let's get back to my picture. the original one, I'm looking for two adjacent acute angles. So acute is the first word that jumps out at me. Acute means that it has to be less than 90 degrees. And adjacent means that they have to be side by side. So for this one, I've got a bunch of things that are less than 90 degrees. So I need to pick a pair of these, or I need to pick two of these that are side by side. Now for the first one, I only have one correct answer, but for this B question, I could have more than one correct answer. So the first ones that I'm going to look at is going to be V, Z, Y, and T, Z, Y. So angles V, Z, Y, and angle T, Z, Y. That's one pair. And then my other pair, let's erase. My other pair could be Y, Z, T. So Y, Z, T, and W, Z, T. And it looks like I have one more set. So let's get back to the original picture. And let's look one more time because I want you to be able to see all of these. T, Z, W. So angle T, Z, W. And angle X, Z, W. All right, all three of those three pairs, remember a pair has two in it, like a pair of socks, a pair of shoes. So there are three pairs of angles that are both acute and adjacent to each other. Now, two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. Oh, wait, can't see the whole thing. Complementary angles are two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. We also call this a right angle. Okay? So you can have it two different ways. In this first picture, the angles are touching. Yep, that was just my notification for my DMV appointment Saturday. In my second picture, the angles are not touching. So this is where it's tricky. For angles to be complementary, they don't necessarily have to be adjacent. They don't have to be side by side. The definition just says two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. And our last vocabulary word today is supplementary. Supplementary. Two angles whose sum is, what do you think it's going to be? 180. You are correct. So supplementary angles are two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. Same thing is true for this one. They can be adjacent, side by side in the same picture, or they could be completely two different pictures. But all it matters is that the two angles will add together to give you 180 degrees. And that's it.